to get started. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Clio Institute's Earth Day 2021 webinar series. We're so thrilled to have teachers and students from around Florida and outside of Florida joining us today. I'd like to welcome those of you who are joining virtually and those of you who are watching from your classrooms. Again, if you haven't, drop your name, your school, and where you're joining from in the chat. So today is the first day of our Earth Day 2021 webinar series where our theme is biodiversity. You can hit the next slide. So again, we're super thrilled to have you here. My name is Gabriela Rodriguez, and I'm a program coordinator at Clio, and I'll be hosting today's event alongside my colleague Julieta Rodrigo, who is the program manager. And if you don't know, the Clio Institute is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to increasing climate change education and advocacy here across the state of Florida. So we're going to watch a quick video now to just give you a better idea of who we are and what we do.
I want you to ask yourselves those tough questions, the ones we avoid: how we want to live, what do we want for our children, what do we want for our planet?
Our atmosphere is so finely tuned for what we need, and we're treating it like a dumping ground, a sewer. The health impact of climate change is a global problem, and we see the results of that on a local level.
If we fail to act now, then we will leave behind a fundamentally degraded planet for our children and grandchildren, a planet that resembles the futures that have been portrayed in dystopian Hollywood films: unprecedented inundation of our coastlines, droughts, floods, heat waves, superstorms. That's the future that we will see if we fail to act on climate.
The Clio Institute was founded in 2010 with the drive to educate and empower South Floridians to act on climate. Founded by Caroline Lewis, a science teacher by training, her vocation led her to understand what was causing people's apathy towards the glooming climate crisis: knowledge.
We're in the middle of the 6th mass extinction.
Today, the Clio Institute is the #1 nonprofit organization for climate education, engagement, and advocacy. Through programs like the Clio Speakers Network, Clio trains people to become climate speakers by breaking down the science, impacts, and solutions. Clio's educational efforts are backed by a world-class expert advisory council of scientists, environmentalists, teachers, and government officials. While the world is already feeling the impacts of our changing climate, not everyone is feeling it the same way. Clio is a leader in the climate justice movement, providing the resources and tools to the most vulnerable communities in South Florida that are on the front lines of the climate crisis.
I wanted to be an outreach for them.
Building communities' resilience through women is the cornerstone of our Empowering Resilient Women program. By teaming up with community members like the YWCA, Clio is able to empower and educate women on how to weather extreme weather events like hurricanes while building community. Clio works to remove barriers and build a wider coalition to fight climate change across faith-based communities, elected officials, and municipalities, schools, and cultural organizations. One of the most important voices that Clio continues to amplify is that of our youth.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now!
Their Gen Clio program meets regularly with students across the region, training them to be climate ambassadors in their school and community.
This is a crisis. Do your job. We'll be watching.
Clio recently launched its Climate Resilient Schools initiative to bring their program into the classrooms while building a robust climate curriculum for Miami-Dade public schools. Clio continues to expand its engagement through multimedia outreach, including television commercials, social media, and billboards. With statewide campaigns like the Florida Climate Pledge,
I care about climate change. And I care about climate change because it affects everybody regardless of race, culture, and ethnicity. Because I'm passionate about the success of my future.
I like the Clio Institute because it takes the time to educate people about the importance of climate change and the things that we can do to improve our world.
You can have your voice heard too. Fund our climate action work today. The future of Florida is in your hands.
All right, we hope that you enjoy learning a little bit more about Clio. So what are we doing today? Well, we're gonna start off with a climate presentation titled Superheroes Among Us, where we're gonna go over climate science, impacts, and solutions to climate change, with an extra focus today on biodiversity. And then after that, we're actually going to hear from one of our Clio/CLIP students, Gabriella. She's a student who's heavily involved with the Clio Institute. And then after that, Gabriella is gonna kick us off into our first activity, which are our climate conversations. Then we'll take a quick break and set the theme with an activity surrounding biodiversity. And then after, we'll take part in our second activity for the day, our action alert, where we are actually going to take tangible action for climate today on this call. And then lastly, we'll let you know how to get involved and continue the conversation with us here at Clio. I do want to mention, please note that this event will not have a dedicated Q&A session. Instead, we invite you to drop your questions in the chat, and a Clio staff member will take care of answering them. So now that all that housekeeping is done, I'd like to kick it off to Julieta, who's going to give you a great Climate 101.
Thanks, Gabby. Hello, everybody. My name is Julieta. I'm a program manager here at the Clio Institute, and I'll be leading today's presentation. As Gabby said, we're going to be talking about climate science, impacts, and solutions. And in order to do that, I want to frame it a little bit about why I'm here giving this presentation and what my journey has been. So my climate story begins in Argentina. That's where I was born. That's where I grew up. On the picture on the left, you can see my sister and I, as well as my grandma, in front of a sea lion statue in Mar del Plata, which was a coastal town that we grew up in. And being surrounded by water really inspired my appreciation and fascination with biodiversity. When my family emigrated to the United States, we moved to Miami, which is where I still live today. And my passion and fascination with the ocean has continued. And that's a lot of what drives my climate work today. So my sister and I actually returned to Argentina when we were older. So these pictures are taken about 20 years apart. But it's great to see how the threads and the influences from my childhood have continued today to inspire me. And it brings me to the place I am today, which is educating people about the climate crisis. As Gabby said, today's presentation is called Superheroes Among Us, and we host these presentations for free throughout the community with the help of our great supporting partners. So let's begin. When you ask somebody who is a superhero, you get typical answers. One category of answers is superhero characters, right? People like Superman, the Incredible Hulk, and Spider-Man. And as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, we're also seeing some newer answers. People like our medical staff, our first responders, truck drivers, and even grocery store employees are superheroes in their own way. And my job allows me to work with a new and emerging class of superheroes, and that's the youth. So the youth have been at the forefront of the climate movement, and they have taken to the streets and used their voices to hold elected officials accountable for climate action as well as climate inaction. These pictures are from the Global Youth Climate Strike in 2019, where about 6 to 7 million people participated in over 150 countries. The picture on the top right of your screen is a climate strike that Clio held in collaboration with many other youth organizations in Miami to make sure that Miami Beach was at the forefront of climate leadership as well. And so why did students and the youth go on strike? And what was the impetus for this global youth climate movement? And so to do that, we have to begin by realizing that their future and our future is at stake. In order to understand the entire story behind the climate crisis, we have to start at the very beginning, which is understanding what climate is. So the difference between weather and climate is a key component that we want to cover. Weather refers to the conditions of the atmosphere over a short period of time. It can change within minutes or hours. So 1 hour it can be sunny, the next it can be rainy, the next it can be sunny again. That's weather. Climate, in contrast, refers to how the atmosphere behaves over a long period of time and space. It's usually measured over decades, but can also refer to longer periods of time, like centuries. And so when you talk about what's the average temperature or regions having tropical or subtropical climates like we have in Florida, that's climate. And so people who study the climate are called climate scientists. And part of their work is analyzing how the climate is affected and being regulated on this planet. And the greenhouse gas effect is the way that energy is regulated on Earth. And it works as follows. So here we have the sun in the upper corner, and it releases energy, mostly in the form of sunlight. This sunlight passes through Earth's atmosphere. And once it gets through the atmosphere, two things can happen. If it hits land or ocean, it gets absorbed by it and it gets used. If it hits something white, like our ice caps, it bounces back. As this energy bounces back, it changes waves, so it becomes heat or infrared waves. And as it tries to escape back into outer space, it's trapped by this thin blue layer called the atmosphere. Now, this atmosphere is full of gases called greenhouse gases. And the main job of greenhouse gases is to trap heat, right? They keep our planet warm. In a normal scenario, the greenhouse gas effect is a good thing. It keeps our planet at a livable temperature. If we didn't have the greenhouse gas effect, we would be living on a frozen tundra. What's happening as a result of human activity is that we are increasing the concentration of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, and they're trapping more heat, and it's making our planet warmer. That's where the term global warming comes from, because our planet as a whole is increasing in average temperatures. And so have you ever heard somebody say that they're not really sure that the climate is even changing at an alarming rate, because the climate has always changed in the past and will continue to change regardless of human activity? Well, that's an argument that we hear a lot at Clio, and we use this chart to indicate the difference as to why that's not necessarily true. So this chart measures carbon dioxide in our atmosphere for the last 800,000 years. And as you can see, over this time period, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere went up and down. These high points indicate periods of relative warmth, because we know when we have more CO2 in the atmosphere, things are warmer. And these low points indicate periods of relative cold, like ice ages. So for 800,000 years, the atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration had never been above this line, which was 300 parts per million. Around the 1800s and 1900s, human industry began to increase at such a rapid rate that we started and producing things like never before. In 1950, we actually crossed this threshold of 300 parts per million, and we're currently here at 416 parts per million as of about 2 months ago. And so what we want you to recognize from this chart is two things. One is that, yes, the climate has always changed. Now, this is due to natural factors like changes in the Earth's orbit and tilt, solar activity, even volcanic eruptions contribute to this natural fluctuation. But the second point that we want to extrapolate is that this is not part of Earth's natural climate cycles. This is what humans are contributing to, and this is what's causing the climate crisis that we know of. And so we do want to take a break and just have a mental check-in. We're going to play a short game, and you can use the chat to let me know the answer. Now, if any of you are unfamiliar with this game, I'm going to put 3 statements on the screen. 2 of them are going to be true, and 1 of them is going to be a lie. And you can use the chat to let me know which one you think is the lie. So number 1, weather refers to short-term trends while climate refers to long-term trends. Number 2, the greenhouse gas effect is weakening. Number 3, Earth's climate has always changed and will continue to change regardless of human activities. I'm going to give you all about 10 more seconds, and then I'll check the chat. Okay, so for those of you in the chat who guessed number 2, you are correct. So weather does refer to short-term trends while climate refers to long-term trends. That is true. The greenhouse gas effect is not weakening, it's intensifying, it's becoming stronger, which is why our planet is warming up. And Earth's climate has always changed and will continue to change regardless of human activities. That is true. But remember, we want to emphasize that human activity is causing the Earth's climate to change in unnatural ways. So let's continue with the presentation, and we're going to start learning about the impacts. And the point that we want to drive home when we talk about climate impacts is that everything is connected to the climate crisis. Every component of society is going to be affected by a changing climate. And so we're going to put that to the test. I want you to use the chat and tell me something that you care about, and I will try to connect it to the climate crisis. So whether that's the economy, a person, a place, a sport, a particular sector of society, what you care about, and put me to the challenge. Okay, I'm going to give you all a few more seconds to answer that. All right, so I am seeing some answers that we can start extrapolating. So for instance, we have an attendee mentioned traveling. So traveling is definitely connected to the climate crisis. Now, whether that's our inability to travel because of threats like extreme weather or wildfires that's affecting hospitality and the way that it's run, or also just the carbon output that we use as a result of traveling, it's all connected to the climate crisis. So we also have this notion of Arctic animals and biodiversity. Somebody mentions polar bears. And yes, polar bears are immensely threatened by the climate crisis. We're going to talk a little bit about what happens when our planet warms, and that includes melting ice. And polar bears are really vulnerable to melting ice because that threatens their ability to hunt, and it threatens their ability to provide food for their babies. Thank you for participating. Keep coming with those answers. So let's start talking about impacts. And fortunately, on our planet, we have 2 mains against climate impacts. They're called our natural carbon storage systems, but you might also have heard them called our carbon sinks. And these carbon sinks include our land and our oceans. So plants and soil and trees, they all absorb carbon through the process of photosynthesis, and they release oxygen. These are very important ways that we can reduce the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, because the healthier our land and our oceans are, the more they can absorb carbon and the more they can prevent our planet from warming up. Unfortunately, as you might expect, we are not treating our carbon sinks the way we should. Land is being threatened. About a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions come from us using our land in ineffective and inefficient ways. Some of that comes from agriculture, from forestry, and other land uses, like making cities. And in particular, when you cut down trees, you're releasing all of the carbon that they've already stored in the system. So deforesting acts as like a double whammy, because not only are you taking away the tree's ability to absorb carbon from the atmosphere, you're also releasing all of the carbon that they stored. And beef is the leading cause of tropical deforestation throughout the world. Conventional agriculture, like the production of beef, emits a lot of methane. And so methane is a greenhouse gas that is many times more potent than carbon dioxide at trapping heat. So as you'll see in the solutions later on, changes to our diet on a systemic and individual level are also going to be solutions to mitigate the climate crisis. Dominant drivers of tree cover loss differ from region to region. Here in North America, the majority of our tree cover loss is due to forestry, right? Cutting down trees for paper or other products. We also have about 43% due to wildfire, whether that's intentional or accidental. But if you compare it, for instance, to Southeast Asia, where 81% of the trees that they're losing are due to commodity-driven deforestation, that raises concerns. This is a big term to indicate that they're cutting down trees to produce products for the rest of the world. And particularly in Southeast Asia, we have rubber and palm oil that's contributing to deforestation. So this is directly linked to consumption, which we'll talk about in solutions. One of the consequences of a warming planet is that our oceans are warming. Oceans absorb about 93% of excess heat, and oxygen concentrations are declining in oceans. That's affecting biodiversity. And oceans absorb more than a quarter of the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. This causes ocean acidification, which basically means that the ocean is becoming more acidic. This, in conjunction with ocean warming, has terrible consequences on our biodiversity. One example are our coral reefs. So coral reefs are amazing, like rainforests underwater. They're intricate and full of diversity, but when the water temperature is warm, coral reefs are stressed and they die. We're seeing this happen to coral reefs throughout the world. And another result of warming temperatures is something called red tide or algae blooms. What happens when we have warming temperatures is that the warming temperatures, in collaboration with other inputs that we're polluting into the water, allow this algae to grow very fast and very wide. All of this growth removes oxygen from the water and creates toxic substances that kill our biodiversity. So our biodiversity is threatened. As you can see, some dolphins have been found killed as a result of red tide. It also affects fish and turtles. I'm going to show you all Florida. We also have seen the effects of warming waters. We are very close to the Biscayne Bay in Miami, and high water temperatures in Biscayne Bay leads to low oxygen levels. And if you combine this with runoff from septic tanks, from stormwater runoff, sewage leaks, and even fertilizer usage, it results in a very deadly combination that is devastating to wildlife. Warming oceans also contribute to more intense hurricanes. Scientists do predict that as the planet warms, we're going to be seeing more devastating extreme weather events. As far as hurricanes go, when our oceans are warmer, they form stronger and larger hurricanes. They bring more rain with bigger storm surges, they move more slowly, and they intensify faster. This is devastating and deadly. On the right of your screen, you'll see a chart of Hurricane Michael's trajectory. And what this shows is that the water in the Gulf of Mexico was 5 degrees warmer than average. And as Hurricane Michael hit the Gulf, this warm water allowed it to grow about 70% in just under 33 hours. so that when it hit the Panhandle, it was the third largest storm to ever make landfall in the United States. And this was devastating for the Panhandle, but we are seeing effects everywhere, from Houston to the Bahamas. And then we're also seeing wildfires. So forest fires are a tremendous risk because as our planet warms, we are seeing fires be more vulnerable to catching on fire and spreading fires so that they last longer. More than 5 million people throughout the state of Florida, which is about 28% of our population, are living in areas that are at elevated risk for wildfires. And we mentioned sea level rise is also a threat for Florida, as well as much of the world. So sea level rise is caused by two things in particular. One is thermal expansion, which is that when water warms, it takes up more space. And two is land ice melting, because on a warming planet, ice is going to melt, and the ice caps, our glaciers, are melting at very, very rapid rates. So when you combine thermal expansion and land ice melt, you get sea level rise. By 2050, scientists are predicting about 2 feet of sea level rise, and by 2100, 8 to 10 feet cannot be ruled out. For those of you who live in Miami-Dade County, this is what Miami looks like today. And on the right, you see what it would look with 8 feet of sea level rise, where most of the county is submerged. And for those of you who live in other parts of the state, you are also going to be affected. So look at all of the space that's underwater with 8 to 10 feet of sea level rise. For those of you that live inland and central Florida, this does not mean that you will not be unaffected, because what happens is that there are millions of people living in the areas that are going to be impacted by sea level rise if these projections prove true, and they're going to need some place to go. So for those in South Florida, they're going to go up to central and northern Florida. And for those on the coast, they're going to go inland. So our cities have to be prepared and create more resilient infrastructure to allow for all of these climate migrants as a result of sea level rise. And unfortunately, sea level rise also threatens our drinking water. Most of Florida gets its drinking water from under the ground. So instead of relying on things like lakes or rivers, most of Florida gets water from our aquifer, particularly the Biscayne aquifer. And so what happens is as it rains and rain hits the ground, it seeps through the soil, it hits something called limestone, which is a very porous rock, which makes up the foundation of Florida. And this porous rock allows this water to become filtered and clean and safe to consume. However, porous rock is also a threat because as our sea levels start to rise, we're seeing seawater enter our aquifers, and it's contaminating it and making it unsafe to drink. Now, we have desalination plants throughout Florida, but the problem is taking out salt from freshwater is a very expensive process, and it's definitely going to impact people disproportionately, particularly when it comes to our low wealth communities, because fresh water is expected to become more expensive. So we're going to take a break again and play another game. So the same as the first time, I'm going to put 3 statements up on the screen. You let me one is the lie, and then we'll take it from there. So number 1, sea level rise is only caused by the melting of land ice. Number 2, beef production is the leading cause of tropical deforestation. And number 3, as oceans warm, oxygen concentrations decrease. I'll give you all about 10 seconds. Okay, for those of you who mentioned number 1, you are correct. Sea level rise is not only caused by the melting of land ice, but it's also caused by thermal expansion, which is the process through which water takes up more space when it is warmer than when it is colder. Beef production is definitely the leading cause of tropical deforestation, and oxygen concentrations do decrease as our ocean temperatures rise. So good job on that. And so warming temperatures also come with extreme heat. Extreme heat has tremendous risks for our health. Impacts of extreme heat include stroke, kidney disease, and cerebrovascular failure. And if any of you on the line are student athletes or athletes in general, heat-related illnesses are the leading cause of death or disability among high school athletes. And so if you play basketball outside or do sports, that's a tremendous risk. The chart on the top right of your screen, you'll see heat index and danger days. Now, what a heat index is it measures temperature as well as humidity. Basically, how does it feel like outside? And the scientists have been projecting that by 2030, Miami's going to have about 126 days where it feels like 105 degrees outside. And by 2050, we're looking at 151 days. Now, this is dangerous temperatures where it's very deadly to go outside because if you spend too much time outside, it could impact your health. And Miami's not alone. For those of you in Tampa, we're looking at 121 and 146 danger days. This is while we are still young, and this is in the middle of like our adult lives. So it's definitely going to impact our generation. And Orlando is the same. The heat risks are very prevalent. And in addition to high school athletes and vulnerable populations like the elderly and children, we also have to think about who works outside. Our agricultural workers, our construction workers, people who work in theme parks, particularly like in Central Florida, where tourism is very big. All of these people are at risk. So it definitely becomes a vulnerability and something that we have to prepare for. And unfortunately, humans are not the only ones at risk. Our biodiversity of all kinds is also at risk. So biodiversity is facing an ecosystem disruption. We're in the worst wave of species die-offs in about 65 million years. We're in a period called the sixth mass extinction. And about 1 million species are at risk of extinction within the few decades. And so this counts for animals as well as plants. And so we're going to take a few moments to just play a game and test a little bit of your knowledge on biodiversity impacts. So we're going to show you two pictures. The sea turtle is the first one. And can you put in the chat your best guess as to how sea turtles are being impacted by a changing climate? I'm going to give you all about 20 seconds to type in your responses in the chat. And if you don't know, just give it your best shot. Okay, so I do see some mentions of plastic pollution. So that's definitely one way that they're being influenced, but that's not so much a climate concern as it is an environmental pollution concern. Now, yes, plastic is made from petroleum, and the more plastic we produce, the more intense our pollution in our climate. But in particular, sea turtles are a very cool species to study when it comes time to climate change. Now, some animals, their sex is determined in fertilization, but in turtles in particular, their sex is determined by the temperature of the sand in which the eggs are buried. And so the higher the temperature, the more likely that it is an egg is going to be female. What scientists and marine biologists have been seeing around the world is that hatchlings year after year after year are more commonly female-led and dominated. And we're going to be seeing an imbalance of the female to male ratio that could put their entire species at risk if there are not enough males and females to keep the population going. So let's try this again, and let's go to a plant, peaches. Let's see if you all can guess how the peach crop being impacted by a changing climate. Again, I'll give you all about 20 seconds to answer that. All right, I do see some responses about extreme heat, and it is very close. So it is definitely linked to extreme heat. Peaches are a very particular kind of crop because peaches need a certain amount of cold hours in order to bloom. This is what's called cooling hours. And most of the peach production in the United States is in California. And California is very vulnerable to extreme heat. Peaches in particular need about 700 cooling hours in order to blossom. And what peach producers have been seeing recently is that the more days of extreme heat, the less likely their crops are to bloom, and the shorter peach production cycle that they're seeing. And so our biodiversity in terms of food is definitely going to be impacted. And if you take it a step further, lower supplies usually means higher prices. So scientists are also predicting higher prices of crops throughout the world for things like corn, wheat, and soy, which make up the basis for much of our diet. And for some, we do want to recognize that all of these feelings of impacts can bring up feelings of anxiety, of depression, of concern, of fear. And we do want to recognize that you are not alone. In particular, I work with a lot of students and I see this very frequently. But what we have found is when students channel these emotions into civic engagement and they join a bigger movement and they see the impacts that their voice has on a changing climate, we do see these feelings of empowerment overpass the feelings of anxiety. We do want to recognize it's definitely something a lot of people relate to and that you are not alone. At Clio, we are also a fan of the 3.5% rule for social change. If you haven't heard this rule, this was a study where different academics looked at social movements, and what they found when they analyzed movements like the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War protests, they realized that you only need 3.5% of the population to be really activated in order to cause serious political change. That is a doable number. And if we take groups, particularly the youth and all of their allies, we can definitely bring about radical change to the way our planet is run and organized in order to mitigate the climate crisis. Okay, so we're going to do a short little activity before we get into our solutions. And so at Clio, we often get asked about policy solutions and what should states and local governments do about the climate crisis. And so we're going to put it into your hands. And so if you were president for a day, imagine that I gave you $5 billion to spend as president, and you had to spend all of it in one day. I have a list of different issues that we talked about in this presentation. What issue you would tackle in that one day and why? So this one's going to take a little longer, so I'll give you about 45 seconds. And I look forward to seeing your answers. All right, so I do see some answers. These are all great examples. One of that was just mentioned was biodiversity loss because it affects the way our foods are pollinated. So absolutely. The reason is that there is not one right answer. We do need to address all of them, but it's good to get creative and to think about how we're going to approach these problems. And so as we start to get into our solutions, we do want to realize that climate solutions affect everybody. And so if we have more access to clean water, air, and a healthier future for children and livable cities for us to live in, it's going to create positive impacts for the whole society. So let's talk about solutions. Solutions are categorized into different categories. And so we have mitigation, for instance, that's the first category, and that comes from the root word mitigate, which means to reduce. And if we reduce heat trapping gases, if we reduce the amount of pollution that we're releasing, we can help mitigate the climate crisis. So one example is renewable energy. We can also adapt to the effects. So while we are working on those long-term solutions, we need to realize that the climate crisis is impacting communities now, and we have to address some of those results like sea level rise. And living shorelines are natural ways to protect our coastlines from increasing sea level rise. And we also have restoration and regeneration, which improves the health of ecosystems. So one example would be restoring coastal wetlands like the Everglades, and crop rotations, which help keep our soils healthy on farms. Remember that the healthier our farms and water sources are, the better capacity they have to absorb carbon. And so why does this matter for the United States? The reason why this matters is because we are a leading polluter. If we look at the top 10 emitters throughout the world of greenhouse gas emissions, United States is number 2. And particularly when you look at per person, United States is number 1. That means the average American resident produces more carbon dioxide emissions than a resident of any other country in the world. And so we do need to collaborate with other countries in order to solve this climate crisis. We've tried to do some really great things. So for instance, one of the ways that we've done that is through the Paris Accord, which was a collaborative effort in 2015 among countries of the world to limit increase in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, this doesn't sound like a lot because it's very small numbers, but on a planetary scale, it creates huge impacts. We also have the Green New Deal, which is being reintroduced into Congress this week. And its goal is to reduce gas emissions in the United States while also trying to fix societal problems like economic inequality and racial injustice. When it comes time to individual solutions, our food is a great solution to the climate crisis. Incorporating more plant-based meals lowers our carbon footprint, and reducing food waste also reduces methane emissions because when food waste hits the landfill, it decomposes and it releases methane, which is a greenhouse gas. So we want to avoid that. One of the ways to do that is through composting, which takes all of this food waste and it lets it decompose in a healthy environment. And we use what's left as a fertilizer to grow more food. And that way it's a circular economy. And think about systemic changes. How can we organize our agricultural systems to allow more capacity for eco-friendlier practices? And how can we increase the capacity of governments to bring these solutions to its people? When we get to our purchases, we do want to realize that consumption and production is a big part of solving this climate crisis. So we can buy less, reusable versus single use, participate in sharing economies. These are things like libraries, for instance, where we don't each need to own a copy of a book. We can go get the book, use it, return it, and somebody else can have it, and this reduces impact on the environment. We can buy secondhand, local, ethical, and sustainable products whenever possible, and of course, to recycle. Our energy is a key solution as well. So we know that most of our energy comes from burning fossil fuels, which contributes to the climate crisis. So on an individual level, we can reduce personal energy consumption, but we can also do policy changes. For instance, how can we increase renewable energy in our cities? One example is through parking lots. So this is an example of a parking lot in Miami, and you can contrast that to Atlanta, where they are using their empty spaces to generate renewable energy, and it also provides a shade for the cars underneath. So it's a double win. And use the power of your future. We need candidates that understand climate change and the urgency behind it. We encourage you to get involved with the issues in your community. And if you're interested, consider running for office as a career, increase the diversity of candidates, and put climate at the forefront. And as we start to close, we do want to invite you to partner with the Clio Institute. We have a climate resilience schools program where we give climate presentations across age levels. We also have a teachers network that teaches, that brings resources for educators to incorporate climate into their curricula. We also have climate lesson plans. If you are in Florida, these are aligned to the Sunshine State standards. And we have a climate leadership information program, which is a program inspired by a student that we work with. It's a peer-to-peer program that brings climate literacy and activism into schools. So if you're interested, you can email Gabriella at clioinstitute.org to learn more and maybe consider enrolling your school in this program. So with that, I'm going to close out. I'm going to pass it back to Gabriella for the rest of the presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Julieta. That was amazing. I hope you all learned a little bit because we're definitely going to use the information that we learned today a little bit later. Now I'd like to welcome a special guest. Her name is Gabriella as well, and she is a CLIP coordinator at Coral Gables Senior High School here in Miami. She's going to tell you a little bit about the incredible things that she does for climate education and advocacy in her community with Clio. And with that being said, Gabriella, feel free to take it away.
Hello, my video can't start.
No worries, we'll take care of that.
Second.
Give us 1 second, everybody, as we get Gabriella's video started.
It's still not letting me, by the way.
Okay, yeah, I'm not too sure why we can't turn it on. I think Julieta might be able to do it from her end, but you can feel free to start speaking if you'd like.
Sure. Hello, my name is Gabriella. I use the pronoun she, her, and I'm a 9th grader at Coral Gables Senior High. Oh, there we go. It worked. Great. I'm a CLIP coordinator as well as a climate speaker and climate policy advocate. When I first really understood the impacts of the climate crisis, I felt this rush of anxiety and fear. It was a horrible feeling, but I knew I had to feel that sense of urgency if I were going to take this issue seriously. To face the facts about climate change, you need to be courageous because it can feel hopeless at times. The only way to combat that hopelessness is to be part of the solution. Getting involved with climate activism is one of the best decisions I have made because in the world of climate advocacy, you find a community and start viewing the climate crisis as an opportunity to be the advocates for change. My individual call to action initiative started in 8th grade when I decided to conduct a project in my school aimed at collecting letters from students on why the carbon fee should be implemented. I needed a speaker to educate the students about the climate science, and that's when I met Nicole Gazzo, who is the founder of CLIP. I was amazed at her speaking skills and thought to myself, I want to be able to speak like that. The letters that I was able to collect as part of my project were later given to then Congresswoman Shalala. This process, as well as Nicole, inspired me to become fully literate in the climate crisis. This literacy has then led me to obtain my climate speaker certification and bring CLIP to my peers in my high school. The initiative has opened the door to other students becoming more literate on speaking about the topic of climate change. Being educated about the climate crisis is a powerful tool, even more when you are able to speak about it. There are endless ways to use this knowledge and apply it. For example, this ability to speak about the climate crisis led me to get involved with climate policy through Climate Citizens Lobby. The Clio Institute is a place where opportunities are endless, consequently guiding you towards playing your part in the fight for a better future. Now, I'd like to lead us into our next activity. In CLIP, we hold conversations about the climate crisis among our peers, because climate conversations are key solutions to the crisis. Right now, we are going to do exactly what CLIP students do, start climate conversations. Thanks for listening, and I'll pass it back to the Clio team.
Thank you so much, Gabby. Thank you so much for your kind words. What an amazing speech. Can I please get my video back on, Julieta, when you get a chance? Awesome. So I believe you all can still hear me. Okay, great. So now it's time for us to actually start some climate conversations like Gabby said. Can you hit the next slide, Huli? Did you all know that 72% of Americans believe global warming is happening, but only 35% actually discuss global warming at least occasionally? That's a big problem, and it's exactly why we need more public education to build public will to go against this issue. And so that's why we're going to start some climate conversations with our loved ones, because those are the people who trust us and will be open to learning more about this issue. So let's do this activity. Next slide. We're going to start some climate conversations right now. So I want to ask you all, students in the classrooms, teachers joining virtually, students joining virtually, what was the most meaningful thing that you learned during our climate presentation? Go ahead and drop that in the chat. I'll give you all like 10 seconds to do so. So again, what was the most meaningful thing you learned during our presentation today? Well, I know that we have students joining physically, so it's a little bit more difficult to get those things typed in quickly. But what we're going to do, Huli, if you can hit the next blurb, we're going to actually, oh, somebody put peaches. Great. What we're going to do is we want you to text that thing that you learned today to somebody that you love on your phone. So take out your phones and text something that you learned today that was of great importance to you to somebody that you love. So that could be a mom, dad, sister, neighbor, mentor, anything like that. And then if you can, let us know in the chat who you texted. So this could be something like, did you know that sea turtles are heavily impacted by the climate crisis? Did you know that the last 5 years have been the hottest year on record? Text that to somebody you love and then drop it in the chat. Okay, Huli, you can hit the next one. Okay, so assuming that many of you have sent this text to somebody you love from your from your phone, take a screenshot of that text conversation that you just started. So I'm going to pretend like I just texted my dad that the last 5 years on this planet have been the hottest year on record, and I'm taking a screenshot of that text conversation. Next, Huli, hit the next one. This is what we would like everybody to do. Take that screenshot that you took and right now post it on Twitter or Instagram and tag the Clio Institute and use the hashtag Clio Institute. And if you don't have social media, you can go ahead and you can email this to julieta@clioinstitute.org. So again, if you didn't catch it, take a screenshot of your conversation that you just started with a loved one, post it to Twitter, Instagram, tag the Clio Institute, and use the hashtag Clio Institute. And if you don't have social media or you can't go on your phone for some reason, email it to julieta@clioinstitute.org. Okay. So I'll give you all like 5-7 seconds to do that. And then, Huli, if you could hit the next one. After you have posted this, you are going to get a reply from us at Clio via social media. And if you sent an email, you'll get the email later. And we're going to send you back a resource that we created that will help you continue the conversation that you just started with the person you texted. So it's going to have a list of questions, of things, of different prompts that you can ask this person to start a conversation about climate change with somebody that's important in your life. Okay, and the next one, next blurb, yeah. So whoever sends this screenshot to us first via social media or email is actually gonna win a $20 gift card to their place of choice. So if you're doing this on social media, as the majority of you should, please make sure you tag us or we won't see it. And then we'll definitely get back to you all later. We'll announce whoever the winner was. We'll reach out to you all via social media and give you your prize. So we're just gonna spend like 30 more seconds on this. Follow the instructions on your screen, text somebody, take a screenshot, post that screenshot, tag us, and then you'll get a resource to continue the conversation. The first person who does this, if you haven't already, is going to win a gift card from us at Clio. And I can only imagine that we are currently being flooded by replies. We hope that you all continue the conversation that you started with your loved one. Okay. For the sake of time, I think we're good to continue. If you have any questions about this activity moving forward, feel free to put it in the chat and we will make sure to help you. So we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Things that we love. So as we talked about earlier in Julieta's presentation, climate change is causing animals and plant species to reach levels of endangerment that we've never seen before. And this threat to biodiversity is really only one of the many reasons why we have to solve the climate crisis and demand for action from our governments. And I'm wondering how many of you have actually contacted your governments and your elected officials before? Let's take a quick poll. So Julieta, you can go ahead and launch the poll. I know that we have a lot of students joining physically from classrooms. So teachers, if you could kind of gauge your classrooms right now and ask your students, how many of you have ever contacted an elected official, and answer this poll based off what they say. Okay, I'm seeing some answers starting to come in. Some no's, some yeses. We'll just wait a few more seconds. I'm seeing mainly no's though, which is understandable. Only one student from the whole class. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. Share the results. Yeah, so the majority of us haven't reached out to our elected officials before, but today we're going to bring that to 100% yes, because it's exactly what we're going to do next. So we at the Clio Institute, Huli, you can hit the next slide. We use something called an action alert, and it's a quick and effective way for us to voice our concerns to our elected officials. So we're going to use this tool today to ask our elected officials to pass a climate emergency declaration for their county. And if you don't know, a climate emergency declaration is a commitment that a city or a county or a country can make to promise that they're going to take action on climate change by ensuring their community switches to clean, renewable energy. And my activism actually started when I helped pass a climate emergency declaration for the city of Miami. I went to a local government meeting one day and I spoke about the reasons that I cared about climate change and how I felt it was going to impact my future and the people I love and the places I love. And after me and a bunch of my friends spoke in front of this board, the people sitting in that room passed a climate emergency declaration. And in that moment, I learned that using my voice actually worked. And I learned that activism actually worked. So that's exactly what we're going to do right now. We have gotten climate emergency declarations passed in local governments in Miami, but now we want entire counties in Florida to do this. So Miami-Dade County, Broward County, Leon County, Orange County, they all need to pass climate emergency declarations. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to first open the link in the chat to our action alert page. And then once you open that link in the chat, it's not there yet, but that's okay. The link is bit.ly/Clio Earth Day. So students joining from your classrooms, you can go on your computers or you can go on your phone and put this link in your device. Make sure you type it correctly with the proper capitalization because it won't work if you don't. Open this link and you're going to see different counties on the top. Go ahead and the first thing you're going to do is choose your county at the top from these green tabs. This will ensure that the message you send goes directly to the elected officials actually representing your county. Please note that for Tampa folks, Hillsborough County is not included because the addresses of elected officials aren't public record for that county, but you can still participate in this activity. You just need to go to Google and search for the name or the mayor, and you'll find a form to submit this message. And if you're not even in Florida, you can still ask your government to pass a climate emergency declaration with this template message. So after you choose from the green tabs your county, Huli, you can hit the next slide. You're going to scroll down on your page and you're going to fill out the information with your personal information. That'll take you just a few seconds. And then next slide, Huli. You're going to scroll down a little bit more after you fill in your information. And you're going to see a pre-written message asking your elected officials to support a climate emergency declaration. All you need to do is fill in the parts of the message that are in blank and are in brackets. You're going to personalize this message with what you learned today and with your climate story, your connection to climate change. And then once you're done, you're going to hit that big blue button, add your voice, and it's going to be sent directly to your elected officials representing your county. So this means that the message you put together is going to go directly to the inboxes of your local politicians, you asking them for a climate emergency declaration. And I know that there are a ton of students in a lot of classrooms watching this right now. So if we can all take part in this activity for the next 5-10 minutes, we can make a huge impact and flood the inboxes of these elected officials, demanding that they support a declaration. So that's what we're going to do right now. If you have any questions about the instructions I just gave you, feel free to put them in the chat. I know it was a lot, but basically just open the link, follow the instructions on that page, and you'll be good to go. And make sure to personalize your message. So with that said, I think we can hit the next slide, play the background music, a pretty strong message. And we know that with everybody's efforts together, it's going to make an impact. So first I'm going to start by just saying we've got a lot of free virtual events happening all the time at Clio. And you can view all of our upcoming events by visiting our website or very easily taking out your phones, opening your camera and scanning this QR code on your screen. So if you scan this QR code, that'll take you directly to our events page where you can explore all our upcoming events and programs. Next slide. So as the majority of you know, today was our first day of our 3-day webinar series. If you enjoyed today, I invite you to join tomorrow's event, which is focused on climate justice. So the intersection of climate change and racial, economic, and social justice. And then, next slide, we have our final part of this 3-day webinar series on Thursday, which is focused on civic engagement. And you can register for both of these events at the link bit.ly/Earth 2021. That's the same link you use to register for this one, and we hope to see you there. Next slide. And if you really like the topic of climate and biodiversity, which we focused a little bit on today, we have a webinar coming up on this topic, exactly, all about it. And it's something, if you're really interested, we're going to be discussing biodiversity, how we can protect it, and how we can just live in more balance with nature in general. It's on April 29th at 5:30 p.m. And we will make sure to follow up with you all and send you the link individually to register. Or again, you can just go to our events page and you'll find it there. Next slide. I also just want to take the next few minutes to invite you to not events, but actually our programs. I help manage a program called CLIP, which stands for the Climate Leadership Information Program. And in this program, high school students in Florida become certified Clio climate speakers, which means that they can basically communicate this issue and teach their peers in their classroom about climate change, therefore increasing climate change awareness on campus through presentations and activities and different forms of engagement. So if this is a program that you're interested in, whether you're a teacher or you're a student and you just want to bring this to your school, please email me at gabriella@clioinstitute.org. Next slide. And much like the presentation that Julieta gave you all today, we also give climate presentations to classrooms virtually for now. Through our climate presentations, just like you saw today, we cover the science, the impacts, and the solutions. And if you are a teacher or a student, and again, you want to bring us and our work to your school, you can email me at gabriella@clioinstitute.org, and we can definitely set up a climate presentation for your students. Next slide. So up next is Gen Clio, and this is our youth advocacy program, which Julieta works mainly on, and some other staff members as well. And in this program, students of all ages from middle school to college age, they adopt and they apply advocacy skills in their local areas to increase civic engagement and to contribute to climate policy in their communities in Florida. And we'd love every student watching right now to, if you're interested, join our next meeting in May. You can hit the next slide, Juli. Next May, our Gen Clio meeting will be happening on May 5th at 4 p.m. No prior knowledge is needed. If you're interested in climate advocacy, we'd love to have you. And you can register by scanning, again, the QR code on your screen with your phone's camera, or you could also go to our events page and you'll find it there. Next slide. And finally, we've also got another program starting up again. It's our Climate Speakers Network, or CSN program. And this is a program where you can become a certified Clio climate speaker. And this is not just for students. This is for absolutely any age, from the youngest in elementary school to the oldest retiree. It's an online certification program that builds your confidence in talking about climate change by breaking down the latest science, the impacts, and the solutions. And on top of that, when you finish the program, you join a cohort of other speakers. So if you're interested in this program, you can register for our next cohort by, again, scanning the QR code on your screen, or going to our website, clioinstitute.org, and going to the Climate Speakers Network tab on our website. Okay, next slide. And that's about it. On behalf of myself and Juli and the entire team here at Clio, I want to thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure to teach you more about the climate crisis and just to engage you in taking action. I hope that you learned something, and I hope that you most importantly feel empowered to join this movement and continue learning. So if you plan on joining us tomorrow or Thursday, I look forward to seeing you. And that's pretty much it. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thanks so much.